This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This week, Muslims across the world celebrate the holiday Eid-al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice. Today, we hear from Connecticut residents celebrating Eid-al-Adha and get a better understanding on how the holiday is being commemorated. One resident will share his plans on making the Islamic pilgrimage known as Hajj. Joining us now is Khalil Rahman. He's a producer with Audacious with Kion Wolf here on Connecticut Public Radio. Well, Khalil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Kat, for having me.
So I'm going to get into these interviews that you did in a second, but would love to know, what made you want to do these interviews in the first place?
Yeah, the idea kind of sprung up on me. Usually before this period of Hajj in the Muslim community, a lot of the Friday sermons and just sort of messaging is kind of getting people ready for this time. It's a holy period for Muslims both in and outside of Hajj. And because of all this, and talking with people in the community who I knew were going for the pilgrimage, the idea struck me that it is so cool that people from Connecticut are participating in this global pilgrimage. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't know much about. Most people are aware that Muslims pray towards Mecca and they're aware that we make this journey, but they're not really aware of the specifics. So I thought this might be intriguing to the Connecticut community to learn more about this process.
So we're about to hear about the pilgrimage part of Hajj in a second here, but can you also talk about the additional steps of Hajj? Because the pilgrimage is really one of the steps, right?
Yeah, so the journey is one of the main steps, but there are rituals that people must complete once they arrive. So before people even get into the city of Mecca, they have to get into the state of Ihram, the significance of which will be described in the coming interviews. But basically, the men will have to put on these two loose white sheets. Women will have to change into loose-fitting clothing. And you're kind of getting into this uniform, physically preparing yourself for this journey. Once you're in this state of purity, Ihram, there are certain physical requirements, like you can't put on perfume, you can't cut your nails, just sort of emphasizing or de-emphasizing your physical appearance and mentally focusing you on worship. And to go into some of the actual rituals of Hajj that some people might have seen images of, you'll see the iconic image of Muslims circling the Kaaba. That's that black cube. This is the location to which we pray to. One of the parts of Hajj is walking around the Kaaba 7 times, kind of participating in this united effort and collective ritual. Once pilgrims complete this tawaf, they have to walk between 2 hills called Safa and Marwa. This symbolizes a story in Islamic lore of Abraham's wife walking in between these 2 mountains, searching for water for her son. Another ritual that Muslims have to complete is this sort of ritual stoning, where they pick up pebbles from an area called Musdalifah and throw them at these stone pillars, kind of symbolizing casting out the devil and kind of asserting your own dominance over your spiritual journey. And then at the end of Hajj, one notable thing is that men are encouraged to shave their heads, either trim or shave, although most of them do shave their heads. This is kind of symbolizing this sort of physical manifestation of a spiritual transformation. And women are also encouraged to trim their hair. But yeah, Imam Safwan will get into the spiritual significance of these rituals, but this is just to give viewers some idea of the physical tasks required of pilgrims. This time period is holy for Muslims both in and outside of Hajj. So if you're not able to make the pilgrimage, you are encouraged to perform extra rituals and pray and supplicate more during this time.
And you yourself have personal experience making a pilgrimage as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to make the minor pilgrimage. This is not the major pilgrimage. This can be done anytime throughout the year, and it takes only a few hours. But I got to go back in December of 2022, and it really is a crazy experience to go and see people from all across the world coming together. I remember we went to Mecca, and usually you enter the Kaaba, that black cube, the area, you're entering it from above, but I think that entrance was closed the day we went, so we kind of entered it from beneath, from the lower staircase. So it is this cinematic view of rising up and seeing, people from all around the world circling this building. And you're seeing people, you'll see kind of the tags from, sometimes there are different tour groups that'll show the countries that they're from. You'll see people from Malaysia, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, just all different corners of the world coming together, all ages, races, physical abilities. There are people being pushed in wheelchairs. There are kids, making the journey with their parents. And it is such a powerful sight to see of people coming together in that area just for this one purpose.
So you already gave us a quick preview, but I still want to ask because you did interview two people here in Connecticut, and we are about to hear from Imam, Safwan, Shaikh. Can you tell us about this conversation and what we're about to hear from him?
Yeah, so I talked with Imam Safwan, really laying out the significance of these rituals. So he, at the top, briefly describes some of the rituals of Hajj and then goes into the significance of why we perform these. I think to an outsider, it might seem strange to have these kind of strung together rituals, these physical tasks, and he really breaks down the spiritual and emotional significance of the rituals.
Well, thank you so much, Khalil.
Thank you, Kat.
And here is Imam Safwan Shaikh of the Farmington Valley American Muslim Center, who talks about the significance of this holiday and making the Hajj pilgrimage.
Yeah, so Hajj is mainly two things. It's a celebration and it's sacrifice. So you'll have millions of people all around the world, literally millions of people all around the world, entering Mecca, which is a holy city in Islam in modern day Saudi Arabia. And they'll be going there and doing certain rituals, right? Which include, for men especially, wearing almost like two towels, right? Two sheets of clothing. You're not supposed to do certain things, such as put a perfume, put on things that might be fragrant, because the idea is that you are going and making this journey for many people, thousands and thousands of miles for the sake of God. And so when you're there, you're doing things to show that, hey, God, we're nothing without you. And so you show your humility. One of the most amazing features about Hajj is that you'll have CEOs who are billionaires, millionaires, and then you'll have somebody who might be, a blue collar worker, perhaps, barely making minimum wage, less than minimum wage, in many countries. And they all look the same. You can't tell them apart. And that's how we're going to be in front of God. So in that sense, a lot of sacrifice. And then it ends, or, the peak of it, or not the peak of it, the Hajj, the celebration of it is that once you're done with these rites, you have one of the greatest holidays that we have in Islam, which is Eid-al-Adha, or Eid-al-Adha, one of the biggest celebrations we have, which is Eid-al-Adha. And it is a celebration where we slaughter camels or goats or sheep, and we give it to poor people to enjoy. And you can imagine, thousands of years ago, before refrigeration and all that, it was a big picnic everywhere. So it really is those two things. It's celebration and it's sacrifice. And it's a way for us to show the humanity that we have, and how a lot of the differences that we have are just surface level, especially in that time when everybody comes in as one big unit.
You mentioned that people are wearing the same sort of outfit, that men are wearing these two white sheets. This is a part of a larger state of purity pilgrims have to enter called Ihram. Can you talk about the importance of this concept?
Ihram is a beautiful signification of the starting of your journey. And you're supposed to put on your ihram before you are even close to Mecca. So you'll actually find, if you are going to Mecca or Saudi Arabia from, let's say, JFK or Newark, or even, Bradley, which is going to be from JFK. So if you find that people are going from JFK to Mecca, you actually find them putting on their ihram, which is the two sheets of clothing, and women getting in their state, making sure they don't have any fragrances on and whatnot, before they actually enter Mecca. So they might actually put it on a layover in Turkey or a layover in Egypt, or wherever it may be. And the reason is, I need to do this before I even enter Mecca. I need to honor this great city. And so it really signifies your intention, your genuineness. And it goes again to what we're talking about, which is that it is a body, mind, soul, all holistic connection. And because it is all integrated. And it's quite, it is quite jarring if somebody, I've done this myself. I haven't gone to the major pilgrimage, which is Hajj. I've done this minor pilgrimage where I've had to put on those two sheets in the Turkish airport, right? And it's quite jarring when you see yourself with those two sheets. You're trying to make sure that you are, comfortable, and you're not doing anything that might, that you're comfortable, and you're not in a position that might be uncomfortable for others. I'll say that. And then you see people who are wearing, dress shirts and suits and all of these things, and it kind of makes you realize, we are blessed with so much. And for majority of human history, these two sheets would have been considered luxury, to have nice white sheets. So again, it's that holistic integration of the body, the mind, and the spirit before you even begin the journey.
What was Umrah, this minor pilgrimage, like for you?
So the minor pilgrimage, or Umrah, it's a lot smaller than Hajj. It can be done any time of the year, and it's done whenever you are going to visit the holy city of Mecca, and it just takes a few hours. But one of the main things that are similar to Hajj is that you put on those two white sheets. And again, for people who have done it, who have gone there, again, you find that you are bare in front of God. And so that really has a profound effect if you're going with sincerity and you're going with genuineness. And that is what I felt, because everybody who goes for the minor pilgrimage or the meal pilgrimage, Hajj or Umrah or Hajj, they'll tell you that things happened to them and somehow an opening happened, right? There was some stuff, there were some things that were testing their patience, and all of a sudden something opened up for them. There was something that was really hard in their life, or even when they're at Hajj themselves, and it all of a sudden opened up. And it happens to every single person you talk to. And that's really the point. The point is that you are there, you're sacrificing, you're patient, you're trying to be patient, you're sacrificing, and hopefully there's an opening that happens. And again, having, your ihram on, walking there in the heat, doing certain steps, all of it makes you one, makes you whole, right? It's not, you can't do it haphazardly. You're doing it with focus, and it really does rejuvenate you in physically, spiritually, and mentally.
The Kaaba is such an iconic building. It's such an important structure in the religion of Islam and just historically for humanity. What was it like for you seeing the Kaaba for the first time?
Yeah, if this goes on, for many non-Muslims, they might not see or they might not understand the significance of the black cube. We don't worship the black cube, which is called the Kaaba. However, it is where every single Muslim in the world prays towards. It's the way to orient the Muslims. And as a Muslim in the West, it's not a 2 hour trip. It's a multi-hour trip, multi-stops. And so when you read it you see the black cube, the Kaaba in textbooks. You see it on YouTube. You see it on people going to Hajj and Umrah on their TikTok, on their Snapchat. And so you have this, want and desire. And so one of the advices that I give people that was given to me when you do make the minor or major pilgrimage is actually don't look at it until you're very close, right? And that there are a few people in this world who have the blessing of seeing the Kaaba and being so close to where the Prophet Muhammad was and Abraham was, and that you were given that blessing. And so obviously for me, it was a flood of emotion that came up, right? It's you're there, you're, who am I? Some kid from Connecticut of all places, which is, for somebody living in Saudi Arabia, they wouldn't be able to pronounce Connecticut. Don't know where that is. But yet I'm here. I'm in front of, the Kaaba. And in that sense, one day, hopefully I'll be in front of God and be also in that good state as I was on that day. So it's quite a riveting, emotional moment. And you'll find people just just be so emotional when they're in front of the Kaaba, and it's quite beautiful to see.
This is a huge endeavor. It's a big physical commitment. People are traveling from all ends of the earth. Why does Islam place such importance on making this journey as opposed to just someone trying to work on themselves from where they live?
There is a general theme in Islam that health is holistic, and that is spiritual health includes physical health, and physical health equals mental or psychological health. And so if you look at our prayers, right, you could pray in your heart. Somebody might say just pray in your heart, think of God in your heart. But in Islam prayers, for example, there's movements, there's bowing, there's prostrations, there's the way you wash yourself, because there is this overall being experience that you should have when you're connecting with God. And Hajj symbolizes that the most, because you're not just praying at home 5 times a day, you're not just going to the Friday service at your local mosque. Rather, you're actually spending your money, you're spending your time, you're spending, you're taking your fancy clothes off, you're anything, that could recognize you as somebody who has a lot of wealth. Those are all taken away from you to really completely as a whole human being. Holistically, you are in service of God. And so you'll find that theme all over in Islam, right? In Ramadan, for example, we fast. But that's not the only thing we do, right? We do a lot of prayers, we give a lot of charity, because there is a general understanding in Islam that prayer to God and getting closest to God is not just, quote unquote, only the spiritual, which is just the heart, and not just only the body, but it's all those things combined, and Hajj really symbolizes that.
As an Imam, you're a community leader and you've seen people go and come back from Hajj. How have you seen people change after going on this journey?
Yeah, so at the Farmington Valley American Muslim Center, we always have a handful of families that end up going to Hajj, and one of the great things is when they come back, how they want to share their story, and they want to spend, even though quietest people in our community who might not mingle that much and might not talk that much to me, usually they want to talk about, oh, I did this on the 9th day and I did this on the 10th day, and then when this happened, this, there's always certain things that happen to you when you're there because there's so many people. And so you find that eagerness, and you find that they have a connection with God that perhaps before kind of, because of your picking up the kids, because of, you got to make sure you find a babysitter, because you got to so on and so forth, kind of, your worship becomes kind of a malaise. And so when you go there, everything is about God. There's nothing else. Everything is about God. You spent, a lot of money to go there. You spent money to come back. So they're very eager to talk about their experiences. And then you definitely notice that they do change. They become more closer to the community. They become closer to the Imam. They become closer to the activities that we do. So you do see a spiritual change that really affects their eagerness and their confidence in Islam.
You mentioned that this time of Hajj also coincides with the holiday of Eid-al-Adha. Can you talk about the significance and some of the history behind this holiday?
Yeah. So Muslims being part of the Abrahamic religions, or Islam being part of the Abrahamic religions, we have a reverence for Abraham, or Ibrahim in Arabic. And so one of the greatest events that happened in his life, as both our Jewish and Christian friends also recognize, is the sacrifice of his son, or soon to be sacrifice of his son, and then that his son was replaced by a ram. In order to symbolize that and commemorate that and show that, again, there's a sacrifice which Abraham was willing to make for the sake of God. And then we, in order to also do that sacrifice, there's a celebration of what a great person that he was, and also that we are symbolically are going to do what God asked us to do. So Eid al-Adha really becomes a kind of a way to celebrate that memory. And practically speaking, especially in Muslim countries, it is a celebration. I mean, it's a 3-day feast. People are, cooking whatever they need to cook. There's picnics everywhere. Days are off from school. It really is actually the bigger holiday, and it's quite a feast and a party and a celebration.
And when you talk about the sacrificing of an animal, Muslims don't just keep that for themselves. They're also required to donate a portion, correct?
When a person does do a sacrifice, if they can afford to do it, and they're able to do the sacrifice, or somebody does it on their behalf, it's highly recommended to take at least a third of it and donate it to people who are in need. And people sometimes ask me, are there people here who need food? And I say yes. There's people in Avon, there's people in Farmington, New Britain. There are people who actually need food, and that again shows you that we are one big community.
Is there anything else we didn't get to cover on the topic of Hajj you think would be relevant for listeners to know?
I think one takeaway, especially for non-Muslims, looking at Hajj and seeing those pictures on your textbooks when you took the world religions class or in college or whatnot, is to really take in the diversity of Islam. And I don't just mean diversity that's skin deep. It's diversity in languages, diversity in cultures, diversity in skin as well, diversity in race, men, women, all kinds of people from all parts of the world, all come for one thing. And it shows you that when you have human beings all wanting to do one thing, then our differences actually become something that help us. And it actually gives it more spirit. And that's something as non-Muslims, I would advise them to take away from that, right? And that it's not just, Muslims doing this, which it is a Muslim, Muslim event. But nonetheless, it shows you the power of humanity when they put away, not in a demeaning way, their differences, but they make sure they come together in one goal. And if they can do that and shed all their clothes, and shed all their money away and then get closer to God, then we can truly do something for the world as human beings. And then there is an optimism, there is a positivity there that I think we're really missing nowadays, where everybody's very negative. Everybody has their cultural wars, their gender wars, their political wars, this and that. And for non-Muslims to look at that and say, you know what? A lot of the wars, quote unquote, that we have amongst each other, a lot of the debates we have, the polarization that we have, that we can put those away when we come together for one goal. And that's something that is profound, and that can be a takeaway lesson for Muslims and non-Muslims alike.
You just heard from Imam Safwan Shaikh of the Farmington Valley American Muslim Center, and Khalil Rahman, a producer with Audacious with Kyone Wolf on Connecticut Public Radio. Coming up next, we hear from a Connecticut resident making the Hajj journey this year. You can join the conversation. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're hearing from Muslims around Connecticut celebrating Eid-al-Adha, a sacred and special time honoring those who have made the Islamic pilgrimage known as Hajj. We're about to hear from Connecticut resident Asif Chaudhry, who is making his Hajj journey this year. Khalil Rahman, a producer with our weekly talk show Audacious with Kyone Wolf here on Connecticut Public Radio, spoke with him ahead of his pilgrimage, which started last Saturday. You can join the conversation and find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
Thank you, Asif, for sitting down with me. So why now? Why have you chosen at this point in your life to make this pilgrimage?
It's knowledge, right? I grew up very culturally Muslim. In that cultural Islam, you make Hajj when you're older. You don't really think about Hajj until you're in your 50s or whatever, when you think you need to be forgiven for everything, right? But in the recent years, I've started actually learning the religion. Actually, about a year ago, just over a year ago, I found out that if you meet certain requirements financially, health-wise, with those things, that it becomes a requirement on you, and it's a sin if you don't go. And I was very close to going last year, but it was too close to the time of Hajj where I found these things out, so I couldn't go. So then I made every effort that I could to go this year, and I was chosen by Allah, because that's my belief, is the only way you can go is to be chosen by Allah. I was chosen to go and make Hajj.
We talked briefly beforehand, and you said you've been preparing for this trip for a few months now. Can you tell me what that preparation process has looked like for you, both on a logistical level and just personally for you on a spiritual level?
So I would say I have been preparing for this trip for about a year, actually, but really got into it about 8 months ago, 7-8 months ago, when I started the application process, because things are very different these days. After COVID, you have to apply well in advance. There's a verification process. They have to ensure that you're set up to come. And then you get approved. And then there's a waiting period until the Saudi government comes up with packages. And then there's a highly stressful period for Western countries where you have to go through almost like a lottery system to try to get a package. Like I said, it's highly stressful, but thank God I was able to get the package. And then because I started my whole thing with a company called Dar es Salaam, they organized a lot of lectures and talks with different scholars where they teach you both about the logistical side of things as well as the spiritual side of things.
What's been the most insightful thing you've learned in this preparation process?
I would say it's just connection to God. And so just to provide a little bit of context, as I said before, I was living a very cultural Islamic life. And about 3 years ago, God guided me to practice the religion the way it's supposed to be practiced, which is through learning and knowledge. As I've been learning, I've gained a stronger connection with God. And this process has done a exponential increase in that, I would say, the Hajj process for me. And I think that's kind of what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a transformative process where you change the entire perspective of your life and what your life is and what your life is supposed to be. Even if you're a practicing Muslim before Hajj, Hajj is supposed to change you at your core and make you realize that even the little things that you're doing, not necessarily wrong, but not on the path, are supposed to change, right? You're supposed to come back a different person. You're not supposed to think the same way. You're not supposed to behave the same way. We have plenty of good Muslims, but I think there's always room for improvement, no matter how good you are. And Hajj is supposed to do that for you.
This is a huge endeavor. It's a physically arduous task. Are there any parts of this trip that you're nervous about or you're not looking forward to?
So all the physical parts, yes, it's hard. There's a lot of heat and big crowds and all these things. Because of the preparation that I've done, I don't think those things scare me or make me nervous. What scares me is I have a weakness for intolerance of people and their bad habits. It tends to upset me when people don't behave in a way that they're supposed to behave. So that's one of the things I've actually been working on longest is my own patience and ensuring that I don't allow other people to ruin my experience, and be more understanding that people come from different places and different environments and they have different habits. And so just overlooking people, I think, is going to be my biggest challenge.
What are you most looking forward to about this trip?
I think just being where the Prophet has been, walking in his footsteps, so to speak. You don't know where he exactly stepped, but more or less he followed this process, right? He went from one place to the other and followed these rites, being in the places where he's been, and through that connecting to God, right? Like everything goes back to God, but just, the example that we were given is the Prophet. And so, doing the things he did, in the ways that he did them, being in the places that he was, I think that's really what I'm looking forward to most, is just being able to have that deeper connection.
So this period of Hajj ends with the second official Muslim holiday, Eid-al-Adha. How do you feel about celebrating Eid away from your family?
As far as celebration, I'm sure we will celebrate in some way with the other Hujjaj that are there. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things for me is being away from my family. Like I think I mentioned earlier, I have young kids, so being away from them. I think this will be my first Eid away from my kids ever. So yeah, it's a little bit sad, but I know that I'm there for a bigger reason. So it'll be upsetting, but we have access to technology now. I can call them, I can FaceTime them, so I think it'll be all right.
Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. This is like Islam 101, the 5 core requirements Muslims have to accomplish in their lifetime. How do you think you'll feel after you've completed this pillar and have sort of ticked it off the checklist?
Yeah, so I don't look at it that way. Yes, it's one of the 5 pillars, but I think, unfortunately, too many Muslims view it as a checklist, right? That I've done these things, and so I'm good now. And I don't view it that way. Like I mentioned earlier, I view it as a starting point, right? It's a change of your whole life for the rest of your life, and you are supposed to go into hyperdrive after this on what you're supposed to be as a Muslim and what you're supposed to do. So yes, it'll be one of those things that like you can so-called check off the list that like, yes, I've completed this once in a lifetime journey. But yeah, the physical part of it, yes, it'll be that, potentially once in a lifetime journey. But I certainly look forward to the spiritual gains that I hope to get from this to continue forward.
Thanks so much to Asif Chaudhry for sharing his journey with us. His pilgrimage started last Saturday, and we wish him well. We also want to thank Khalil Rothman. He's a producer for Audacious with Kion Wolf. You can hear his work on Audacious Saturdays 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 11 p.m. or stream it anytime on your favorite podcast app. Coming up after the break, we hear from a member of the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about the Muslim holiday Eid-al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice. The Muslim community across Connecticut is celebrating this holiday this week, and joining us now is Dia Fortenberry. She's an Assistant Athletic Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement at Wesleyan University, and also the Speakers Bureau with the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut. Thank you so much, Dia, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Good morning.
And for our listeners, you can also join the conversation and look for us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Dia, you've been listening to the interviews that we aired earlier. Anything that you would like to respond to? Anything that jumped out to you?
Definitely. Something that jumped out to me is the difference in being able to practice your faith, your deen, when it comes to being in Medina. I also had the pleasure of doing not the major, but the minor pilgrimage. And of course, there's a certain balance that you have to strike living in the States when it comes to practicing, but literally everything is centered around practicing your faith and living it out to the best of your ability when you're over there. So It's a huge difference. And the other thing I just want to add on and reaffirm is that these pilgrimages, yes, they're huge milestones in your life for the sake of your religion and for the sake of God, but it's also a starting point. You know, you're supposed to come back from those experiences and opportunities kind of re-energized to do even more and set yourself up for more success when it comes to your faith.
And you're actually reverted to Islam. Can you explain to us, what does that process entail and what does that mean?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up Baptist, Christian Baptist, and I reverted to Islam in my sophomore year of college. And essentially, it's a very simple process to become Muslim. So after talking with some friends about Islam and then taking a course about the Abrahamic faiths called Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and then practicing about 17 out of 30 days of Ramadan, I decided that I really felt something special with this faith and wanted to go ahead and become Muslim. And that's a simple process where you just say, both in Arabic and in English, I bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. So you say that once in English, once in Arabic, and that's how you affirm your faith, and that's how you become Muslim. And that was about 6 years ago for me now.
Wow. What was it about the faith that drew you to in the first place?
Yeah, I think one is the common sense aspect of it. There's so many questions that I had as a Christian that weren't necessarily answered for me inside the faith. So the common sense of Islam, like being told there is no God but God, when you put your head down to pray, when you put your head down to confess, or you raise your hands up to talk to God, you're not, confessing through a human or, paying someone money to cleanse you of your sins. Like it's just you and your creator. And then also all the scientific miracles in the Quran that are kind of just now being caught up with in the modern world, really amazing to me. But I think the primary reason was I remember distinctly watching a woman raise her hands in the mosque and make prayer. And she was so obviously connected to her God, no one was worried about her. She wasn't worried about anybody else. And I really likened that experience to me going down to the altar every Sunday from my spot in church to go down and just cry and cry and cry. And I realized that in order to be connected to my God, to my creator, I didn't have to be performative in that sense or wait for any special type of opportunity given to me by someone else.
Well, and you're 6 years in, and so after your reversion, what was the first year of holidays like versus what do the holidays look like for you now?
Oh man, it was hard. So, there are two major holidays. The first Eid al-Fitr, that's the one after Ramadan. And it's kind of hard to be lonely for that holiday because ideally you've been fasting for 30 days, going to the mosque every day to break fast and pray with your community members. So by the end of it, there are tons of parties and celebrations and everybody's invited. The second Eid, this Eid, Eid-al-Adha, it was extremely lonely. It's I won't say it's not as big as Eid al-Fitr, but it's definitely more family focused. If you're celebrating with your relatives, with your parents, with your brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles. And if you don't have that, the best you can do, the best I could do, at least at that point, was going to prayer in the morning and then just trying to keep up that happy spirit after you leave the mosque. It's not that people don't want to celebrate with you, but they don't necessarily understand like what the big deal is about this day. And it's also like, didn't you just have an Eid? So it's kind of difficult to explain to non-Muslims.
Right. Time isn't real for many people. Because you don't have anyone in your immediate family who is also Muslim. Is that correct?
Not yet.
Okay. And because the holidays are usually a time for family, and now that you're 6 years in, do you find, or have you found your community, or how has the community been like for you? Especially, this is new for you, especially when you first did your reversion.
Yeah, I can say I definitely found my community. It began when I was down south in my hometown, New Orleans, but then definitely like once I came to Connecticut, I found a community, very youth focused. And up to this point, it's been amazing. I have community members that literally planned my entire nikah or like my entire wedding for me and like, took pins out of their own hijabs to make sure that my jewelry was sitting correctly. It's beautiful and it's amazing. Gave me so much to be thankful for. And now even being part of MCCT, being on the Speakers Bureau and having opportunities to share my story, my experience, opportunities like this one, it's really a strong affirmation for me that, yeah, you're a revert. I still call myself new because it's only been like 6 years, right?
Right.
But your experience is still valid and it can still be a source of strength and inspiration for other community members. And I think that's the most important part about finding a community is gaining strength from them, but also lending your strength to them as well.
And I believe we're going to touch on this just a little bit, but last year, Connecticut State Representative Marion Kong was attacked coming out of an Eid celebration. What has it been like marking this holiday this year, after what we witnessed last year? Does that change anything? You're more aware of things around you, or what has that been like?
Yeah, so I mean, it was definitely a tragedy, a travesty as well. As far as what it changes, I think as Muslims, we're always kind of aware of the threat of Islamophobia around us at all times. And obviously, sometimes it presents and actualizes itself in more concrete ways than others. But I think it just ups the vigilance within the Muslim community, but then also maybe the understanding from outside of the Muslim community that, you know, as as far as we've come when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and equity in our communities and our countries, there are still very real and palpable threats to people just being who they are unapologetically. But I think as much of a travesty as it was, it again serves as a source of inspiration. Like this representative, she in no sense backed down. She isn't necessarily a victim of her circumstances, but a survivor of her circumstances. And, she lives to tell the tale of understanding what it means to be a Muslim woman in a prominent position, living in her truth, but also dealing with the impacts and the realities and the threats that come with that.
And what does it mean for you personally to be a Muslim woman?
That's a great question. I think for me, being a Muslim woman means being in touch with my creator. One of my prayers is always that I'm a reflection in this world of the light that God gives to me. So for me, it means being someone who is unapologetically going to stand up for justice, for peace, for equity, for inclusion, wherever I see it, to inspire, to uplift, to show and to model and to give respect wherever and whenever I can, and to be someone that someone can look at and be like, wow, like there's something about her. And I want that something, whether or not they know it, to be the fact that I have complete trust and faith in my creator and that all things will work out for the good, not just of me, but for those around me and those who also strive toward truth and towards justice.
Well, we have a couple minutes left here, but I do want to ask still that you work on a college campus in the diversity, equity, inclusion space. Can you talk about what are some challenges or misunderstandings do you think people have about this holiday, the faith, especially in workplaces and in schools?
Yeah, that's another great question. I would say probably one of the biggest challenges / misunderstandings is what exactly are they celebrating? It's actually something that's also found that I also knew about when I was a Christian. So it's also in the Christian faith. Abraham, we call him Ibrahim, right? It's a story. This celebration is a story of him having a dream from God about sacrificing his son. And in Islam, we believe that dreams that the prophets have, they're things that are taken very seriously and they need to be acted upon. So Ibrahim, this man who's known as a friend of God, how many prophets, how many people ever are going to be called the friend of God, so very intimate relationship. Ibrahim decided, okay, you know what, this is what I got to do. He talked to his son Ismail about it. Ismail was like, hey, Dad, if God said you got to do it, you'll find me one of those who are patient. So they're about to do it. And then God at the very last moment, as other speakers have said, replaced Ismail with an animal. And he was like, hey, you passed. I wasn't really going to make you kill your son, but it was a test, And so this holiday commemorates that story in the sense of, we all have different tests. We all have things in our life, whether Christian or Muslim or Jewish or agnostic, we all have things in our life that we may not necessarily want to sacrifice for the sake of something greater, but we have to remember everything in this life is a test. And even if we don't necessarily have to sacrifice it, there will be moments where we have to make hard decisions and we have to rely on God to get us through those times and just put your trust in him. And I think maybe that's a misunderstanding that I remember people saying oh, you're Muslim, they're talking, you worship the Muslim God. And it's like, no, it's not the Muslim God. It's just God, period. Like the same God Jesus prays to. Like, you may believe he's God, but like we pray to the one he was praying to. So I think just like the general misunderstanding that we're celebrating something different, or we're talking about something foreign, when really it's something very familiar within all the Abrahamic
traditions. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you so much to Dia Fortenberry with the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible, and our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app, and thank you so much for listening.